Okay, wonderful. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, Louisa Peck, and I had a near-death experience in 1982, a heck of a long time ago.
Yeah.
I didn't tell anybody about it for 30 years because I didn't know what to do with it. And because I originally was an atheist. And so the integration for me took many stages. First, I had to believe these things were happening. Then I had to change my identity to someone who was what I would formerly call a woo woo wacko. And then I had to make a decision that I was going to share this with the world. And then that sharing became my books and my participation in ions and kind of outing myself to the world as a woo woo wacko. Like, yeah, I know this stuff is real, which, my old self is still horrified. It's not like once we take this leap, our inner cynic goes away. It's still on my shoulder being like, I can't believe you're doing this interview with the Near Death Institute. Oh my God. And whenever I have a paranormal experience, my cynic is trying to explain it away. So I will just tell quickly a quick version of my near-death experience, and then some of the paranormal events that brought me around. So I was an alcoholic, and an alcoholic who loved cocaine, as most did. Anyway, and I was in a nightclub in Manhattan with a date who was a coke dealer, and we ran out of cocaine. Now, I had, like many young women who are alcoholics or whatever, there were big pieces of me missing. And in this nightclub, I was finally feeling like I was enough because of the drugs. So we came down, and I was just turning into, Cinderella with the ashes again. And the coach was becoming a pumpkin again. And I said to my friend, we got to get some more Coke. So we pulled the money we had, and I was a bus girl at that time in New York. And so I had lots of tips on me. And we bought Coke, what we were told was cocaine, from this guy in the nightclub. So many years later, after I got sober, I'm 30 years sober now in AA and still go to meetings constantly and love them. Someone I met there, well, actually, it's been two people who have told me they were drug dealers in the 80s and that they used to cut cocaine with lidocaine because lidocaine was much cheaper. And because it's an anesthetic, if you put it on your gums, it does the same numbing thing that cocaine does. So we put this powder on our gums, it numbed them, and we bought this, I think it was a gram. I'm never sure if it was a half gram or gram. I can't remember. I'm so out of it now in terms of that stuff. But anyway, so my friend, as soon as he tried it, he was a coke dealer. So he said, man, we've been had. This is baby powder or something. It's not cocaine, because it wasn't doing anything in terms of a high. So I just thought maybe it's really bad cocaine. It did numb our gums. So I'm just going to do the whole pile at once. So I just snorted the whole thing at once. And it did not get me high. But what started to happen was I started to die from lidocaine poisoning. So since usually used as a topical anesthetic, but it just stops the nerves from connecting. And so my signals from my brain to make my heart beat were going away. So it was going slower and slower. So I was trying to breathe to get oxygen. I didn't know what was happening. Actually, it started with the tingles all around me for like a gray out before you faint, and then later I was starting to seem dark, and it was suffocating for oxygen. So I was breathing, and nothing was happening. This nightclub was in a basement in Manhattan, in Greenwich Village, and so my thought was, there's no air in the basement here. So I went to my date, and I was like, there's no air, there's no air. I had gone to the bathroom, which is the only reason I didn't pee myself anyway when I died. But I came out, I told him there's no air. He took me to the bartender. The bartender was like, calm down, gave me a glass of water. I didn't want it, but I just, to satisfy him, I took a sip of water. And for them, I fell backwards, had a grand mal seizure, followed by cardiac arrest that went on and on while the bartender was doing CPR for 3 minutes with no response. For me, I shot up into the air. I had a great sense of relief that I was leaving behind what I just considered that messy project, that messy business I was trying to do as Louisa that just wasn't going well at all. And I was like, thank God that's over with. And now I'm just me. And so I shot up into the air. I did a dive into the ocean, which was below me, perfect blue ocean. And then I wanted to be on the shore. Next thing I know, I'm on the shore. Nothing is real. It's real energy, but it's symbolizing something. So it's not like I'm actually in the ocean. I'm in my concept of oceanness. And anyway, it's hard to explain that these things are icons and symbols, not the same as atoms and electrons, and so on. Anyway, I got to the shore and I saw a house up on a mesa, and I wanted to be at the house. I knew it had to do with me. I didn't know what. But instead of getting to the house itself, I got to the bottom of the mesa, which was now a big pile of rocks, and they were covered with disgusting green slime. And that was all of my resentments and all of my coping skills and the things that made me an alcoholic and an addict of just rejecting, not knowing how to do life. And so coming up with these kind of bad ego-driven ways to get around. I had to climb past that. Didn't know that at the time. All I thought was, this is really, really gross. Maybe it's rotten seaweed. I'm just going to climb past it. So I climbed past it, but in the process of doing that, I lost my body, which didn't strike me as anything but an annoyance at the time. Because when I got to the house, I was at the door sill and I was like this far from the door sill. It was like I was a subjective camera, but there was no more body attached to it. So my thought was only, I'm not going to let this stop me, the fact that I have no body. So I was able to cross the threshold. And as soon as I did, the first thing that struck me was how worn the wood was there. It was very old, grooved, like almost powdery wood. And I knew it was because all of my ancestors had passed through this same doorway. All of my ancestors had passed through this house. So it was worn from millennia of them doing that, or the symbol of it anyway. And as soon as I was inside, I felt their love, and I felt their excitement that I was there and gonna join them. They were super happy to welcome me. And I saw none of them. I did not see anything but the interior of the house, but I had a sense of my father's father as being especially eager to meet me, because he had died before I was born. So with that, my next thing I noticed though was that there was supposed to be an armchair in that room that they all sat in and loved to look at the view through this big picture window, the view of the ocean. And I thought, that's not fair. I want to see the ocean. As soon as I thought I want, something grabbed me by my sternum, which I did not have, but you know where your sternum is, pulled me across the floor with this kind of delicious sense of like moving forward. It was even starting then, and I was like, whoa, it was kind of like when a ride starts and you're excited for it. And then I didn't know what was coming next, but we went up over the windowsill and out and flew across the ocean. And I had this terrific sense of like just wonder, excitement. And I'm flying across the ocean and I have this wonderful sense of zooming forward, which I think now was my vibration being raised by this angel who was with me. I didn't know he was with me though. I didn't know he was the one who had pulled me across the floor. Anyway, I just thought, wait a minute, this is a little too perfect. I'm flying into the sunset with a beautiful sky all lit up, and people can't fly. And then I just thought, is this real? And as soon as I thought, is this real? A voice, a knowing, a resonance answered me, not in words, but in telepathy. And it said, more real than anything back there, meaning in Louisaville. And I was very surprised to be answered. You don't expect to be answered when you just wonder something. But I had to acknowledge that it was right. The voice was right. This was more real. It's direct energy rather than this hologram we have going on in our minds all the time, where I'm putting together stuff from my retina, stuff from my eardrums, stuff from my skin, and making a hologram. That's what we call reality. It's in our brains. Whereas here I was in energy that was real. So I was approaching the sun. I eventually sort of passed through a filament and I was in the sun. And that's where I experienced the light. And the light was everywhere, all consuming, and just subsuming of me. So I had a sense of it like infiltrating me with joy and bliss and warmth. Actually, I felt warmth. And it took me a second to realize it was love. And I was just in this bliss of love. And my thought was, finally, because I was that insecure 22-year-old woman with fighting so hard to feel seen, feel loved. I like to call it tap dancing. I was always tap dancing to please people, and I had this sense of finally I was loved and I was complete. Then I began to sense a figure that I could not see, but I could sense a figure holding me like an infant in its arms and just pouring love into me. You are so loved. You are so loved. And I loved the parent, but which is what I have called it since, but I eventually was just sort of subsumed in love, where I was thinking nothing. I wasn't thinking of an exchange. I love you, you love me. I was just in love and of love. And then the parent said, you can't stay, you're not done. And boom, the light was gone. And my first reaction was to feel like I wanted to throw a temper tantrum. I felt like I wanted to throw a toddler tantrum and kick them in the shins. People wonder about this. How can you go from bliss and joy to that? Well, I was passing through whatever it is to go back into my body. So I have all this fear around me. I have all this anger around me. They are things to keep me in my body. But in passing through them, I felt them. So immediately following the anger was a second of fear, which was that I was dropping in darkness. And this was a little bit of hell, I think, just the sense of having no control and falling in blackness. But then the sense of dropping ceased, I think, because I was back in my body, but still not really conscious or present. I began to see these little white stick figures kind of drawn in chalk on the darkness itself. And they were doing these little shenanigans. They were like going on a teeter-totter and a swing set and playing and doing cartwheels. And I thought, well, I guess I'll watch these like Saturday morning cartoons. I'll just sit here and watch this until I can go back. Because I was still kind of like feeling the parent and feeling the loss of the parent, but knowing that I wasn't forsaken, knowing that someday I would get back to the light and that the parent still loved me, even though it had let me fall. And so one of these figures began to kind of block the way of the others, and it filled in solid instead of being a chalk outline. And then I realized it was saying to me, how many fingers, what is your name? And I was so bummed, because it took me a second to put together, oh yeah, he thinks we're separate. He thinks he has to make these signals and sounds, and I'm supposed to do it back, and I'm back in the world. And my thought was, I'm back in the meat puppet. Like, I did not want to be back in this thing. And people never understand what I'm saying about unless they've had an NDE. When I needed to speak, I felt like I was in here and my tongue and mouth were in a garage underneath me. Like that was my thought, was they were down there somewhere, and he wanted me to do something with that. And I was just like, oh God, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to go back to this. It just seemed so primitive. But eventually I said two, and then I said Louisa, and I was back. And I 3 minutes without oxygen doesn't really give you brain damage, but I was definitely in a kind of state of being a 5-year-old child. I did not have my full thinking back yet. So I just thought they had thrown water on me, and that's why there was so much water around me. It was actually sweat that had come out of me when I was revived. I have seen other people who've had cardiac arrests, and the sweat pours out of them, and they pee themselves while they're dead. But anyway, I didn't know really. I knew that something had happened here, and I had no idea about the grand mal seizure and so on. And there was a crowd of people in the nightclub all around me, all looking at me, all standing there staring, gawking. And I was like, they think something happened here, but they don't know about what really happened. Anyway, we went outside, was waiting for the ambulance, which I didn't know we were doing. The bartender came up and talked to me and said, you were gone for 3 minutes. We didn't think you were coming back. And I was back into my 22-year-old persona. I was smoking with my legs crossed in my mini skirt and my stockings, and I just kind of looked at him and said, yeah, thanks. I didn't acknowledge that he had saved my life at all. I was just a little twerp. And when we got back to my apartment, I had this sense that my date and my roommate were like grown-ups talking about me. I wanted a drink of alcohol, and they were like, no alcohol for you. And I was like, what? And anyway, they put me to bed. In the morning, I told the story to my roommate. She asked, so was that parent that was holding you, was that God? And I knew in my heart that it was. I remember this moment of thinking of it and remembering it. But I, as Louisa, who I was, could not go there in my public personality. So I just kind of laughed and said, yeah, that was like God. And I went into our room to try to write down what I remembered of what I thought was this amazing cocaine overdose drug trip, which there's no such thing as, because it's not a hallucinogen. Anyway, I wanted to write it down, and I reached this kind of fork in the road where I knew it was real. But this is 1982. There is no such thing as the term near-death experience, or I guess Raymond Moody had coined the term in 1978 or 9 when his book came out. I can't remember. But anyway, it was not part of the lexicon of popular culture. So I had certainly never heard of it. And I just had nothing to attach to my experience except religion. And I was really opposed to religion. My father had been sort of forced into the Catholic Church as an altar boy and had had bad experiences with the priest, and he had really villainized religion for me. So I felt like that about it, and I felt like I'd have to turn into this boring churchy girl, and I just wasn't having it. I said, how can I get out of this? How can I get out of acknowledging that this is real so I can just continue with my life as a person in New York City, like going to nightclubs and doing all the deal, And so I decided that it had been a brain phenomena. And it's so funny because so much of the stuff that I came up with to convince myself it wasn't real is the stuff I read now from brain scientists who are trying to explain away near-death experiences. So just as they said, it gives you pleasant memories because you're dying, I thought that as it shuts down. And then I thought that my brain was sort of closing down all its circuits until all that was left was this really basic experience of love that was kind of at my core. And I've read them saying that too. Anyway, I was going to go with that it had been hypoxia because I wasn't breathing, and that it had given me this very pleasant hallucination while I was dying. And then for some reason I had come back. And then I would think, like, what about when he said, you know, you can't stay, you're not done yet. What about that? And I'd be like, well, never mind about that. What about when he said more real than anything back there and you knew it was right? And I'd be like, well, never mind about that. So I just took the whole thing and I shoved it in a vault. And my intention was to just move on as though it had not happened. And the after effects did not start that I knew of for a long time. Instead of being like uplifted or transformed by my NDE, I went into a really dark depression, which a lot of NDEers did back then. You can't tell anyone that this thing happened to you. I did tell it as a drug trip story to my future boyfriend and my sister, and I had told my roommate, but I really stopped telling there because what does it matter? It was just, to me, it was like, one step above a dream or something. So the first paranormal experiences were dark because I was still drinking. I was still lost, and I had not acknowledged God or goodness or service or anything like that yet. So the first one was I saw a ghost who was equally unhappy with the world. He was on a beach in Gloucester, and I think he was searching the horizon for a ship where a loved one of his had died. I think he was stuck in that loop of, I'm going to see this ship. I'm going to find this person who I love. They can't be dead. And so he was looking at the horizon as I crossed paths with him. I had been watching him for a good 30 seconds as I approached him. But when I said, how's it going? He just barely moved his eye toward me. It was all bloodshot and I could see capillaries in his nose and everything. And when I went a few paces further, I thought, what a jerk. Why couldn't he at least say hi? And so I turned around to look at him with great disdain, and he was not there. And I tried to think of all the ways he could have gotten away so fast on a big open beach. That's not easy, especially if you're an old man. He also had on a authentic rubberized Macintosh, like the fish sticks guys had back in the day. Anyway, and mine were the only tracks on the beach. So again, I had a thing I could not deal with, and I stuffed it in the vault. Then I can't go into this story a lot, but I had foreknowledge that my nephew was going to die. As soon as I heard that my sister-in-law was pregnant, I knew he was going to die. And it was very uncomfortable to know that. And the closer it got, the more urgent my sense that he was going to die was. But I couldn't tell my brother because what are you going to say? You're going to say, hey, I think your baby's going to die. I don't know why, I don't know where, I don't know when, but it's going to die. You can't say that. So I just had this incredible guilt when it came to pass. And I knew another weird thing, which is what I called them, had happened and had to go in the vault and get locked in there also. Not going to think about this. So then came my turning point, which is that I was driving extremely drunk, and that voice came back to me when I finally got to my house in the woods, and I was standing outside holding myself up with the door, having driven home just so plastered I could not stand without holding onto the door. And the same voice, the same "you can't stay, you're not done" voice, shot a message through me. And it was two things. It was, this is the last time I can help you, meaning it was not you who got yourself home, it was I. And I understood that he had been helping me many times when I should have died. But he was at that kind of Al-Anon point of saying, go ahead, destroy your life if you really want to, which it says all kinds of cool things about free will in this life. And the other was, you do know right from wrong. And this messed with me because I had been writing in my journal, and I had written, there is no right, there is no wrong. They are cultural constructs designed to benefit the hive. Like, that was what I thought. And so he knew what I wrote in my journal. So he's like, you do know right from wrong. So then he's gone. And the rest of the night is a blackout for me. I don't remember anything after that, but I remember very perfectly the moment when he helped me cross this narrow bridge. And I thought I did it. And then that moment. So this was a big weird thing. And then after that, took me a month and I went to my first AA meeting, and I surrendered, as they call it, that I did not know how to live, and it wasn't working with alcohol, and I didn't know any other way to do it. So I went to AA, and after I'd been there like about a week, I said my first prayer, and there was another weird thing that happened after that, but I'm immediately after my prayer that sealed my commitment to sobriety, but I don't really want to tell that one now. I'll just say that I got sober, but I was still very annoyed in meetings when people would talk about God. I still had this great aversion to the God word, to anything like that. Though I knew my weird things had happened, I just didn't want them to have happened. So I guess, let me think. There's the experience with my sister dying, but there are other ones that were, what do you call that? When there's some kind of proof to you. So one of the ones with proof was when I was at a stoplight. And this has happened to a lot of people. You don't even have to have had an NDE for this to happen. But when the light turned green, the same voice said, "Don't go." And I thought, what? That's silly. And then it said again, "Don't go." And I looked in the rear view and there were no cars behind me. So I made the split second decision, I'm going to obey this voice, because I remembered it from when my sister had been dying. And I waited, and then like 1 second went by, 2 seconds went by, and then I just thought, how long don't go? And then this car just streaked through the intersection in front of me. I just remember it was a white car and it was going faster than I had ever seen a car go before in my life. And that my thought was, why are there no sound effects? Because in movies, when you see a car going that fast, there's like sound, and this was just like, it was, and this is the first time I answered him. I said, "Thank you," because I understood he had saved my life. So you can see I'm moving along from the shove it in the vault to answering back. And then I began to hear sirens and so on. And then there was a second similar episode that happened a little while later. Another one is that I began to read minds accidentally. And so a very clear one with documentation was that I was the director of the Writing Center at the University of Washington. And we just had a clipboard in those days, is how people signed up to meet with a tutor. And so I had the clipboard, and this woman came in. She wanted an appointment. I said, "Okay, your name?" And she said, "Wendy." And my brain just kind of went, like it just, had the pen on the paper. I wanted to write Wendy, and it felt like I can't remember how to make a W. And my hand, the pen, it felt, when you try to touch two batteries together the wrong way and they're like, no, that's how my hand was with trying to make a W. And so I thought, well, I know how to make an L because my name starts with L. I'll just write Lee. And I wrote L-E-E. And the woman jumps back like I'm some kind of conspirator, I don't know which, I don't know what. And she goes, "How did you do that?" And I'm all embarrassed. I kind of cross it out. I go, "I'm sorry." And then I'm able to write Wendy. And then she goes, "That's my last name. I was waiting to say it." And I said, "I'm sorry." And so then I'm very embarrassed. It's like socially wrong. And she is furious. And I just start to write over Lee again and make a big comma, Wendy, like trying to fix it on the paper so that she won't be so mad at me. And she said, "How do you know my name? I've never been here in my life." And she, I think, thought that I had been spying on her or was part of something bigger that was spying on her. And I know when she did come in for her appointment, she didn't speak to me, but I saw her across the room, like just giving me the evil eye, like that's the woman who knew my name. And so when that one happened, I told two people. This was another like big breakthrough through for me. I emailed my friend Brent and told him this had happened. And I think he may have known a little bit about my near-death experience. I'm not sure. I can't remember now, but I trusted him. And then there was a tutor in there who he was very big on C.S. Lewis, and he was religious. But I told him he was the only person in there because he had witnessed her raising her voice and stuff like that. So he was like, well, what's going on there? And I told him, and he said, huh. And he said, seriously, you just wrote her name? You didn't know her? And I was like, I didn't know her. I just wrote her name. So this is baby steps toward accepting that it's real. And there were more and more of these that happened. The one where I came out to myself as a woo-woo involved a spider. I can tell the whole story if you like. They're all told in my book, which we can talk about later. But that's the one where I came out to myself. And then there's one that convinced me to go to Ions. It was a mind reading experience. And we are able to read minds sometimes, I believe, because something has that shell I talked about of fear and anger around me. It is designed to block out spiritual energies other than my own. Why? Why would we be made with this kind of what I call a God-phobic sheath? It's analogous to a hydrophobic sheath or membrane that surrounds each of your cells, because the cell needs to have its own operations going on. And so the cell boundary kind of confines it. And we're similar. If we were as evolving creatures constantly distracted with spiritual stuff, you'd be like, wow, I hear a voice, and the lion would get you. Right? And so we are evolved specifically to be only aware of physical things so that we can survive physically. But when you have a near-death experience and you pass through that God-phobic membrane and pass through it again, coming back into yourself, it's damaged. And so I like to say mine leaks. So I've never gone to mediumship school or anything like that to try to enhance these powers. Maybe that I'm getting old enough now that I'm retiring, I might. But for me, it was just random times when I would get information and it would be another weird thing. So the capper was just that I pulled into Home Depot and I thought, oh, my friend who's a carpenter, Josh, he probably comes here a lot. And then I thought, gosh, I really like Josh and his wife. And then I thought, and I'm just stopping my car and parking, and this is all I'm doing. And I think, yeah, you know what? I bet their sex life is still really hot. I bet even with the kids, it's still really hot. I bet sometimes they send the kids to grandma's and it is red hot. And then I saw her naked on a 4-poster bed, and her hair was all down across her face, whereas usually it's up in a bun. And I had never dreamed about this side of her. And she was looking at me like with this come on expression. And I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? I am such a pervert. Why am I seeing my friend in this way? Oh my God, I can't believe that. Okay, I'm just trying to shake it off. I go into Home Depot. And what's cool is I kind of thought I was in Lowe's, and so I went the wrong way, which ate up about 30 seconds. And then I was like, oh no, lumber's over here. And so I came back to the front and I'm going this way, and here comes Josh. And we meet. If I had not gone the wrong way, I would not have met him. Do you see what I'm saying? So when I meet him, I'm like, oh, hi, Josh. I was just thinking about you. And I felt super awkward. And I said, how's it going? And he goes, really good. The wife and I just sent the kids to grandma's for the weekend, and we got an Airbnb, and it was much needed. And so I had picked up, he had, as we talked about it, like a few months later, when I got the gumption to tell him, he had parked his car and he had just taken a moment to like think that was so good. And I love my wife, and he's a painter as well. So he had that image as he remembered her in his mind. And it had traveled across the parking lot and I had picked it up. So this is a very difficult one to stuff in any kind of vault, right? You can't just say, oh, of course I saw, whatever. So that was the one that finally motivated me to go to Ions. Although it took me a while. I didn't go until I heard an interview with Jeff Long on NPR. And he was the first person who sounded sane, who was connected to NDEs, because someone had given me Betty Eadie's Embraced by the Light, and it had just really turned me off. And so I thought, I am not going to go to some group and be surrounded with a bunch of people who say, there's Jesus and manila folders and briefcases on the other side. I didn't want that. So when I went to my first IONS meeting, I was very, very defensive. And I was just like, are these people crazy? Are they kooks? And eventually they became my posse. So I'll stop there, Amira, if you have any questions.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I do have some questions. So when did you like actually, because I know there was a progression. So first you were stuffing everything away in the vault, and then
Mhm.
slowly over time you started talking about it, sharing about it a little bit, acknowledging the voice, saying thank you. Um,
Mhm.
that's major. So how did your self-image and your self-love and your self-worth and all that, did that also build up gradually? How did that um kind of not fix itself, not like you were broken, you were not broken, but how did
I
you
was,
manage that?
I would say I was in addiction. So basically, um, I was repulsed by the idea of Alcoholics Anonymous also. And there was this, I was a lesbian at the time, and there was this cute lesbian, motorcycle lesbian, who was in the town where I ended up hitting bottom. And she would come into the coffee shop where I was working then and flirt with me, and people would say, haha, she likes you. And I'd be like, oh my God. And I wanted nothing to do with her. And then I stopped drinking once for a month when my partner left me, because, when your partner leaves you, you're afraid you're going to drink yourself to death, right? It's very likely that you're going to drink yourself to death. I thought this was normal for everyone. And so I just gave myself 30 days without drinking. During that 30-day period, I was walking in the morning, enjoying not having a hangover. It was like the
Mm.
coolest thing to be out in the sunshine with my friend, not having a hangover. And we passed this woman. And she was the only person I had ever met who was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as we passed her, I said hi, and we went by, and then my friend and I went, she's the one who likes you. And then something said, go back and tell her that you'll take a motorcycle ride with her. And I was like, why would I do that? And then it was like, just think how there'll be sun and you'll be out in nature in the wind and it'll be so nice. You'll be alive, it said. And I was like, okay. And so I went back and I said, that motorcycle ride, yeah, I'd like to do that sometime. So what my angel was doing then was, I was also an extremely codependent person. If I got in a relationship with someone, I needed to stay in that relationship. So the way this played out was, when another weird thing happened and my dog was killed, I called her. And though she had broken up with me, because when the 30 days was up, I went right back to just drinking like crazy. It's a very convoluted story, and it's told both here and here. Anyway, when she came after my dog died, and she never left, and she was in AA. So I went to AA meetings with her, and she needed me to be sober. And so I was like, it was like the angel took my codependence and made it into a tool to heal me,
Yeah.
in that I was not going to leave her, so I was not going to leave Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
When it came time for that to change, he he appeared as a spirit messenger. He so I'll just tell you this. He, when it was that relationship was over, that I had a dream about a gigantic spider, and that I found the courage to put the spider in a glass, but it just lay there on its back and showed me its belly, which was this incredibly intricate pattern of diamonds made of like triangles of beige and brown and gray. And I thought in the dream, diamonds of infinite precision. And the next day, there was a gigantic spider on my ceiling above where I write. And I thought, well, I was courageous in the dream, so maybe I can be courageous now. And I thought, that's weird. That's weird. But I got a glass, and it didn't lie on its back in the glass. I ran outside with it and threw it in a bush, which was the same kind of bush it had been in the dream. And it lay on its back there. And it showed me the same pattern again. And I heard, like this message, not words, but this sense of like diamonds of infinite precision. And it was God saying, I am in everything. I am in even the details of a tiny spider's belly, or giant spider, whatever you want to call it anyway. And then it was almost a year later that I went to a birthday party for a woo-woo friend, where she tried to explain to me what a spirit messenger was. In a social setting, I was very contemptuous. I was like, a spider is a spirit message? Like, are there flea and tick spirit messengers? Like, I was just like so embarrassed for her, for everything she was explaining to me. And she said, isn't that when your relationship ended? And I said, no, it wasn't. She didn't leave me for another few months. On the drive home, I realized that the first spider had come when I started that relationship, when I was staying at my brother's house. And that was right around the time that I did the, hey, I'll go for the motorcycle ride, and started the relationship. And the second spider had come when she began to flirt with another woman at work and started that new relationship. And that was the end of her role in my life. So basically, it was marking off, this is a time when you needed this person to be in your life, and that's ended now. And so then I hit, before I got in the interim between when I had seen the spider's belly and when I had gone to the friend's house, I had gone through the hell of that breakup, in that she was gone. I had no reason not to drink anymore, but I had a baby now. He was 2 years old then. And when I would think, I need to drink, I can't stand being abandoned. I can't stand, it was like all my deepest wounds were just screaming. And I just thought, no, this little life, this little baby, he needs me to be here for him. And so I thank God, a friend, the same one that I had written to about the mind reading, he started bringing me to meetings, and I was 7 years sober, but that's how long it took me to really be sober on my own 2 feet, to really be like, no, I am invested in the kind of life that the 12 steps are talking about. So from then on, it was kind of like a collaboration between Ignacio, my angel, and the 12 steps. There was one time when I was so sick of being obsessed with people that I was attracted to. I had infatuation as another form of addiction, because I could get high off of making progress toward the person that I was infatuated with. And I came out from an experience of having gone to a restaurant with a guy that I was so infatuated with, but then got starting to talk to all the other AA people there, until I didn't even notice when he moved from our booth to another. And that was fantastic to me. That was amazing to me. So when I came out of the restaurant and it was quiet, I said, I don't want my love to be a fire hose anymore. I want it to be like a fountain that goes to a lot of people. Can you help me? And at the time I didn't know if I had thought of it, but now I'm pretty sure Ignacio thought of it, because it's not something I would think of. He said, every time you're in an AA meeting and someone annoys you, you need to make a beeline to them after the serenity prayer, and you have to shake their hand, and you have to learn three things about them. Like, not you talking, you have to learn three things about them. And I was like, oh shit. So then I'd be in an AA meeting and maybe somebody would do a share that sounded rehearsed to me or canned, and I'd be like, oh God. And then I'd be like, fuck, I have to go shake their hand and learn three things. So I would do that. Or there'd be a girl that was like, all the guys thought was hot, and I'd be like, oh, she's such a, and then I'd be like, oh, I have to go. And so this was a huge spiritual lesson because I held to it faithfully, and I learned to love all these people that had formerly annoyed me. They all became dear friends. And the women that were too cute or hotties or whatever, they wanted me to sponsor them. So I became a kind of almost maternal figure to them. And I learned to love without a transactional sense of it, like a fountain, like I had asked. And I found that the more I love other people, the more God fills me up with the light. And it's about not needing anything from people. I just moved to Oregon, and I have been making roots here like just insanely. Like, I'm in the garden co-op, and I'm go to all these like exercise classes at the little place in the little town near here. And of course I go to AA meetings, and I have made more friends here than I had in Seattle post-pandemic. And because a lot of us drifted apart from each other in AA during the pandemic. But it was Ignacio who taught me how to do that. I often say that love is like a muscle. If you go try and, lift weights and your muscles are not developed yet, you feel like this is impossible. I can't do this. And it doesn't feel good. And it's, and the stronger the muscle gets, it actually gets to the point where it feels good to do the exercise. And you have confidence, and it makes you stronger. This is what's happened with me in love, because I used to be like, do you love me? Do you love me? Can I have some? Can I have some? And once I recognized it came from God, and that my job was just to give it away, my entire life transformed.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love the image of the fire hose and the fountain. Because I think a lot of us can learn from that. And I related to a lot of the things you said because I too struggled with self-love and self-acceptance when I was younger. I wasn't a drinker. I didn't do any drugs. I wasn't hanging out in nightclubs, but I was involved in a lot of toxic relationships because, like you, I was looking for that external validation and love me.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that. That was so wonderful.
Right, the
And
sun is coming out, and I'm facing it. Do I look too weird?
no, you look like an angel, bright, shiny angel. But I have so many more
Amazing.
questions that I wanted to ask you about your angel and all that. But I think maybe we'll just do a part two, and then we can get into those things. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. I learned so much from you. I have so many, well, I want to say memories that came up, but it's like not memories really. It's like milestones that I forgot I had,
Ah,
overcome and
right,
things, yeah, and
right.
things
In
that
your
I,
own transformation, in your own
yes, yes,
transformation,
reflection on
you're
my own
analogous.
journey and how wonderful it is. And um, it's beautiful. It's a transformation. It's life,
Mhm,
and I especially loved how your relationship with God got not like stronger and more
mhm.
um radiant, I guess, over time. Like now it's just you cannot exist without it because it's just
Right,
there all the time. But there
right,
was a time where you denied it completely.
right,
And so that's
right.
also something that I have in common with you with my journey. So thank you
Okay.
again. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me
Well,
today.
thank you for all that you do, Amira. Thank you for your
Oh,
work.
you're so kind. It's not me. I don't do anything really. I just, follow
You work
orders.
hard. I know you work hard. So thank you.
Oh, you're so sweet.